Before we get to that split between ad revenue and subs revenue, I guess the first question would be on print newspapers versus online newspapers. You must be counting your lucky stars. You'd already gone through the pivot that you've overseen over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, no, that's clearly this is a moment where, although our home delivery newspapers were continuing to working like clockwork, demand for home deliveries actually we've seen some real buoyancy in that since the coronavirus stopped. But of course, you know, in a time of lockdown, having a digital offering and a subscription model makes sense. What I want to say before anything is that we wish this wasn't happening. We wish this story wasn't happening. We wish that people weren't dying, and we wish that our colleagues weren't, like some of your colleagues, having to go out and cover this and risk their own health on the front lines in hospitals and elsewhere. So, you know, this is not good news for anyone, this virus. But it's true that, you know, with a subscription-first digital news offering, you know, we're seeing very strong audiences.
Well, here to your message in the middle of that, Mark. Do you think that we'll see newspapers across the country go under because of that balance between print and online?
Sure. Now, at the New York Times, I mean, advertising is a very important revenue stream for us, but it's less than 25% of our economics. And we have this very strong growing revenue from, in particular, digital subscriptions. And the reason the market has broadly welcomed our results today is because they can see that engine of strategic growth is also working really well. But clearly, if you're a media company, not just newspapers, but also a lot of TV across America who are really dependent on advertising, I think at least for the coming months, this is going to be quite a bleak picture because of the broader macroeconomics and the fact that many advertisers are not advertising right now.
And talk us through that, including the guidance, Mark, you gave about the current quarter on advertising. Is it across the board, all types of advertising spenders cutting, or is it certain types of sectors?
Honestly, Will, if you thought about category by category and thought about the coronavirus and the impact you're reporting on day in, day out, you could kind of guess what's happening. And people aren't traveling, people aren't staying at hotels, not many people are buying cars. The list goes on. So it's across print and digital. We said overall, we guided in the current quarter, Q2, so April, May, June, we thought advertising across the piece would fall by between 50 and 55%. So essentially halving compared to the second quarter last year. So this is a big hit. It's a big hit to us. As I've said, it's only a relatively small part of our total economics, but I have to say, it is a real indication of the scale of the broader economic hit which is happening in this country, and indeed because we're feeling this internationally across the world. So I want to say in Asia, we are seeing some pickup in demand for advertising. There are parts of Asia where, the RFPs, the requests for space are coming in, and we are beginning to see some bounce back in some markets in Asia.
And Mark, in terms of the growth in subscribers ahead of expectations that you saw, do you feel like that's the typical New York Times customer just sped up a little bit, or is it a different type of customer because of lockdown? They're coming to you, I saw you mention on the earnings call, because of your cooking section or other things that help them from their work-from-home lives?
We're trying to do a lot more than we're trying to do the best coverage we can, the best coverage we hope in the world, the most trustworthy coverage in the world about the pandemic and its consequences. But we're trying to do a lot more. We've got a wonderful new section called At Home, started in digital. We've now launched a new print section in the middle of this, At Home, which is some of the things you can do, solving some of the problems you might have, and also some of the kind of ways you can entertain yourself and your family at home. And so we're offering a very broad spectrum. And what's interesting is both the millions of new registered users we're getting and the many hundreds of thousands of new subscribers, far more than we've ever had before. What's so interesting is amongst these are some, definitely younger, definitely more ethnically diverse, more geographically widely spread people than we've seen. So one of the things we're seeing is a real broadening, not just of the total Times audience. We reached more than half of all American adults in March this year, more than half. It's not just the total audience, but the engaged audience is a broader audience, and it's a much more diverse and younger audience than we've seen before.
And Mark, just finally, in terms of online and on the app, what type of stories are people flocking to? And did interest on corona coverage decline at any point? Have people got a little bit lethargic towards the story?
What I want to say is there was a peak, particularly around the announcements of the lockdowns around the world, but also in the US, and a lot of anxiety in late March. We saw extraordinary peaks, and I would say that we're seeing now more interest in non-corona. I think as people settle into this strange period of isolation and working from home, actually their interests are broadening again. Cooking, you mentioned cooking. We are seeing immense interest in some of the food recipes and food coverage of the Times. We're seeing our crossword and games app doing really well. People we have Wirecutter, a consumer choice site that's doing really well because people are actually doing a lot of shopping, albeit on remote shopping, shopping online. That's happening as well. So we're seeing a broadening of the interest. Though the heart of this extraordinary story, it's a health story, it's a medical story, it's a political story, it's a geopolitical story, it's an enormous economic story, and that still overall is still dominating what people come to the Times for.
Mark Thompson, as always, great to see you. Thanks for joining.